The evening was supposed to be a
I want to thank
quiet
my colleague
victory.
here for her
I was propped
invaluable
up on a mountain
contribution to
of
the project
pillows in
rollout.
our San
We
Francisco
couldn't have done it
penthouse,
without her.
following my doctor's strict orders for bed rest, while our unborn son kicked gently beneath my ribs. On the massive screen across the room, the live stream of the Innovate EAI conference was playing, a digital window to the world I could no longer join, all while I waited for my husband, Julian, to give his keynote speech. He had called an hour before, his voice electric with nervous energy, claiming he needed to do one last rehearsal. I wanted to believe him. I always did. The moderator on screen announced his name, and my heart swelled with pride. I watched him walk onto the stage, a titan of the tech world, expecting nothing more than the brilliant performance he always delivered. But then the feed glitched. For a split second, the camera accidentally cut to a backstage angle. And there, in the dim light, stood my husband, Julian Sterling, in the custom-tailored suit I had picked out that morning. And beside him, her head tilted towards his, as if they shared a secret universe, was Sienna Vance. Her hand was on his arm, his head was bent low, whispering something that made her laugh. They didn't kiss, but the intimacy, casual and careless, was like a lightning strike in the dark. And I saw it, live in our pristine living room. I gasped, a sharp, painful intake of air. Why was he looking at her like that? My body went rigid. I reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, just to have something to hold. My phone lit up on the table, a notification from our smart home app. Julian has left the geofence. He was on his way home. My stomach clenched into a knot. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The main camera feed snapped back to the stage, the moderator thanking Julian for his revolutionary insights, completely unaware that my entire world had just been fractured on a live stream. I clicked off the display, but it was too late. The image was burned into my memory, sharper than any photograph. A sudden sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. Oh God, not now. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. No, little one. We're okay. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning, because the look I saw on that screen was nothing compared to the secrets I was about to unearth, and the next truth would be infinitely more devastating. For years I told myself that supporting Julian's dream was my purpose. I carried that belief through lonely dinners, canceled anniversary trips, and weekends spent researching neonatal specialists, while Julian built his empire. He liked to say he was too focused on the big picture to get lost in the details. The details were me. The details were our baby's high-risk development. The details were every single thread that held our life together. I lay in our silent, cavernous penthouse, staring at the panoramic view of the bay where our future was supposed to unfold, suddenly feeling like a stranger in my own home. The architectural model of the dream house I designed for us, sitting on the bookshelf, the Cartier watch Julian gave me the day we found out I was pregnant, gifts meant to smooth over his increasing distance, now felt like artifacts from a life I no longer recognized. The truth was, Julian had been drifting away long before tonight's televised betrayal. He stopped asking about my doctor's appointments. He missed the ultrasound where we heard the first heartbeat. He called the organic meals I carefully planned unnecessary expenses. He dismissed my exhaustion as hormonal. Every little criticism was a paper cut, so small I barely felt it until I was bleeding. I made excuses. I made myself smaller. I told myself that building a legacy required sacrifice, and I was simply doing my part. But seeing that unguarded moment between him and Sienna forced me to face a reality I had been carefully ignoring for months. Julian hadn't just gotten busy. He had emotionally checked out of our marriage long ago. I shifted on the bed, my hand instinctively going to my stomach, and my fingers brushed against his travel bag, still unpacked from his trip to Zurich. It smelled faintly of perfume, something floral and musky, a scent I had never worn. He used to smell of my laundry detergent and the cedarwood soap I kept in the shower. Now he smelled of someone else's world, a world I was clearly not a part of. My baby kicked again, a small, insistent reminder. "What are we going to do?" I whispered to him. "I don't know," I answered myself honestly, because denial would only hurt us both more. The child's movement steadied me. It wasn't despair I felt, but a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't losing a husband. He was already gone. And yet, I had no idea the deception ran deeper than a shared moment on a live stream. Someone else was about to show me just how long Julian had been building a separate life. Morning came without any sleep. I had spent the night replaying that split-second image from the conference feed, but what kept me awake wasn't just the betrayal. It was a cold, pragmatic fear. Our assets, our home, our baby's future. Julian controlled every trust, every portfolio, every major financial decision. For years, he insisted it was more efficient for his wealth management team to handle everything. I trusted him because I wanted to believe we were partners. But a partnership requires transparency. And somewhere along the line, he stopped treating me like his wife and started treating me like a line item in his budget. I reached for my tablet on the nightstand and opened the portfolio app I rarely checked. The list of our shared investments was right there. Stocks, bonds, real estate funds. The numbers stared back at me, immense and impersonal. Without Julian's signature, I couldn't touch a single dollar. My hands grew cold at the thought. I wasn't afraid of being without Julian. I was terrified of bringing a child into a world of instability he had created. A wave of dizziness hit me, and my breathing grew shallow. A panic attack. I immediately started the breathing exercises my doctor taught me. In for 4, out for 6, I whispered to myself. You are safe. The baby's well-being was all that mattered. The thought of Julian leveraging our child's future out of spite sent a chill through my entire body. I pulled up the portal for our primary joint account on my tablet, the one with the sleek, minimalist interface. My stomach dropped. Access denied. Julian had changed the master password. He always said his security team advised regular updates, but now it felt like a vault door slamming shut, a warning that I was officially on the outside. My tablet chimed. An encrypted email from an anonymous address. You need to look at Julian's private ledger. Start with the Apex Angel Fund. I froze. Attached to the email was a password-protected file. The password was a single word, Sienna. Below it was a screenshot of a wire transfer. $2 million, moved to a holding company just last week. My baby kicked hard, as if he could feel my fear. I swallowed, my throat dry. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious. But a deep dread settled in my bones, because whoever sent this email knew far more than I did. And if Julian was quietly moving millions, what else had he been doing right under my nose? And who was this phantom ally sending me clues? The hours after the keynote speech dissolved into a surreal, sleepless haze. By 10 p.m., the penthouse was eerily silent, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of distant stars. I lay in bed, staring at the door, half dreading the moment it would open, and half terrified that it wouldn't. My phone remained dark. No messages from Julian, no calls, no excuses, nothing. By 11:30, I tried his cell, straight to his polished professional voicemail. I tried again, same result. The man who lived with a charger in his hand, who preached about constant connectivity, had gone completely dark the moment he was exposed. I wanted to feel a storm of rage, but all I felt was a hollow ache expanding in my chest. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco glittered, indifferent to my private collapse. The distant hum of the foghorn, the faint rush of traffic on the bridge, It all made me feel impossibly small, like the entire city could watch me fall and never even blink. I pushed myself up, needing a change of scenery, needing something solid beneath my feet. On the bar cart sat Julian's favorite crystal decanter, still holding the expensive scotch he'd poured the night before. It was a symbol of the life he had built, a life he had invited me to witness, but never truly share. My tablet chimed again, another encrypted message. Check the charter jet logs. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated to the corporate travel portal, a system I knew he used for all his flights. A list of flight manifests loaded, and there it was, Zurich, London, Tokyo, passenger 2, listed on every single one. Sienna Vance, hotel bookings for presidential suites, dinner receipts from Michelin-starred restaurants I'd only read about. And then, the most recent entry, a private villa, booked in Napa for this coming weekend. A wave of sickness rose in my throat. Julian wasn't avoiding me because he felt guilty. He was with her right now. He had orchestrated this parallel life with the same meticulous precision he used to build his company. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. All those nights he claimed to be sleeping at the office. All the times he said he was on a solo trip to close a deal. He wasn't just lying. He was meticulously erasing me from his life behind my back. The penthouse was silent. I thought I was imagining things until I heard the soft chime of the private elevator arriving at our floor. Someone was right outside our door. Someone was entering a code on the keypad. A series of beeps, then a harsh buzz, access denied, a pause, then silence. I held my breath, listening for footsteps, for any sound at all, but there was nothing. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Maybe it was a delivery. Maybe it was Julian too drunk to remember the new code he'd set. Or maybe it was someone else, someone who thought they still had access. I couldn't risk finding out. Not now. I engaged the secondary digital deadbolt and turned back to the tablet. The travelogues felt like a signed confession Julian never meant for me to see. A suite booked at a hotel in Sausalito for that very evening. Dinner reservations at a waterfront restaurant he'd once promised to take me to. 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives, purchased 3 weeks ago. And then something that made my blood run cold. Dozens of charges for car services to and from Sienna Vance's address in Pacific Heights. Not once, not twice, but consistently for the last 6 months. My stomach churned. For half a year, he had been nurturing a whole other life while I was at home, following my doctor's orders and planning a nursery for our son. I tried the corporate finance portal next. Access denied. Another dead end. Another reminder that Julian had systematically walled me off from our life. The tablet chimed a third time. Look in the safe. The one behind the Rothko. I hesitated, my eyes drifting to the massive abstract painting in the living room. The sterile white walls of our Chicago penthouse suddenly felt like a cage. I walked into our bedroom, the plush carpet muffling my steps, and picked up the brand new smartwatch from its box on the dresser. A gift for Julian. As I synced it to his tablet, a notification popped up for a shared calendar I didn't recognize. Aspen Project. Curious, I tapped it open and found flight confirmations. Reservations for a private ski lodge. 2 guests listed under Julian Croft and Sienna. The air left my lungs. That explained the late nights at the office, the sudden coldness in his touch. This wasn't just a fling. He was planning romantic getaways, building a life that didn't include me or the baby I was carrying, a future where we were just a loose end. I sank onto the bed, the tablet shaking in my grip. The betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a meticulously planned operation, and worst of all, he was using money from our joint investment account to pay for it. A thought, sharp and cold, pierced through my shock. Someone wanted me to see this. Someone knew exactly how Julian organized his deceptions. My phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "You're not safe in that apartment." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Because if Julian came home and saw the look on my face, I knew what he was capable of when his perfect image was threatened. And this stranger clearly believed I had to be gone before that happened. By morning, the penthouse felt colder than ever. I'd barely slept, torn between the fear of Julian walking in and the terror that he wouldn't. I tried to eat some toast for the baby, my hands trembling too much to hold the knife steady. The baby, a tiny, innocent life caught in this web of lies. As I sipped some water, I opened my laptop, desperate for some kind of answer. A new email sat at the top of my inbox, sent at 3:05 a.m. from Sienna. Vance. My breath hitched. For a second, I expected a gloating confession or a veiled threat. But as I clicked it open, I saw it wasn't for me. It was an accidental forward, meant only for Julian. Subject: Aspen Next Steps. My hands grew clammy as I read. "Julian, you handled her perfectly last night. She doesn't suspect a thing. After Aspen, we'll consult with the lawyers about your financial exit strategy. I've already drafted the paperwork to transfer the primary assets into the new LLC." I stopped breathing. The words swam before my eyes. Sienna wasn't just his mistress. She was his architect in dismantling my life. A plan to help Julian liquidate our shared wealth. A plan that would leave me pregnant and penniless. I clicked the attachment, a file named Asset Realignment. Inside was a detailed list of our properties, bank accounts, and a timeline for how to legally sever my access before serving me with divorce papers. They were going to leave me with nothing. They'd even flagged my prenatal insurance policy for termination. A wave of cold fury washed over me. This wasn't an affair. It was a corporate takeover of my life, a hostile erasure of 12 years of marriage. I forwarded the email to a new, secret account, then quietly printed a copy, stuffing the pages into my designer handbag. I needed leverage. I needed a shield. As I zipped the bag, a sharp kick from the baby reminded me who I was fighting for. "We're going to be okay, little one," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I promise." But the words felt hollow. My phone lit up again. The same blocked number. "You have the email. Now go. Pack a bag. He can't find you there tonight." A deep chill settled in my bones. Whoever was helping me knew everything. And the next piece of information they sent would be the one that shattered my world completely. That afternoon, I left the city. My doctor had advised against travel so late in my pregnancy, but staying felt far more dangerous. Something primal screamed at me to run, to protect my unborn child from the fallout that was coming. As I drove north, my thoughts drifted to a charity gala from last month. I'd felt unwell and stayed home, but Julian went. A friend later mentioned she saw him in deep conversation with Sienna, their heads close together. At the time, I'd dismissed it as work. Now, the memory felt like a betrayal in front of the whole city. My heart ached with humiliation. Everyone must have known. Everyone must have seen them together and pitied the pregnant wife at home. The city skyline in my rearview mirror seemed to mock me, a glittering monument to the life I was losing. I gripped the steering wheel, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. He didn't just break my heart. He made our life a lie. He'd stood by my side at every ultrasound, his hand on my belly, telling me how excited he was to be a father. He'd helped me design the nursery, picking out the softest blues and yellows. It was all a performance, a lie to keep me docile while he plotted my removal. And the worst part was, he was going to take everything. The home we built, the future we planned, the security for our child. He was going to leave me with nothing but a broken heart and a baby he never wanted. I pulled over to the shoulder, the weight of it all crushing me, and let out a sob that felt like it was torn from my soul. I wasn't just losing a husband, I was losing myself. My baby deserved better than a father who saw him as a liability. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve hardening inside me. I wasn't going to be a victim. For my child, I would fight. We were going to find somewhere safe to land. I promised him that, my hand resting protectively on my stomach. As I pulled back onto the highway, my phone buzzed. Another message from my anonymous guardian angel. He knows you're gone. He just left the office. You need to be out of the city before he can track your car. My grip on the wheel tightened. This person wasn't just a bystander. They were inside Julian's world. And as the next message appeared, I knew they were watching over mine too. The text lit up my screen, stark and urgent. Silver SUV behind you. He hired a PI. Don't go to your parents' house. My blood ran cold. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there it was. A gleaming silver SUV, staying 2 cars behind me with unnerving precision. Not tailgating, not driving aggressively, just there. My heart hammered against my ribs. I made a sudden turn onto a side road. Why is that car turning too? I tried to keep my breathing even, for the baby's sake. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. Julian wasn't going to let me just disappear. The kind of control that doesn't end when the marriage does. I swerved into a busy gas station, pretending to need fuel. The silver SUV slowed, drove past the entrance, and pulled over, down the road. I held my breath. Relief came a moment later, with another text. Good. You lost him. Head to the Lakeview Inn off Route 12, room 42. The door is open. Now my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I had no idea who this person was. I couldn't trust them. But my only other option was to face Julian. And my every instinct screamed that he was the real danger. A man who would secretly liquidate assets was a man who wouldn't hesitate to take my child from me. I followed the directions, my mind racing. When I found the room, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, my heart in my throat. A man in a tailored suit stood by the window, looking out. He was older, with kind eyes, but a weary expression. He turned as I entered. Clara Croft. I flinched. Who are you? Someone who believes Julian and Sienna need to be stopped. His voice was calm and steady. My name is Ben Carter. The name registered instantly. Ben Carter, the legendary architect, Julian's former mentor, the man whose firm Julian had taken over 2 years ago. Why would a man like him be helping me? He glanced at my stomach, then met my eyes. You and your child need to be somewhere he can't find you. Julian is meeting with his legal team right now. They're fast-tracking the asset transfer. My breath hitched. Fast-tracking? Ben nodded grimly. Yes. They're preparing to file an injunction against you to freeze you out completely. My world started to spin, and then he said the words that made it stop entirely. Clara, Julian isn't just hiding money from you. He's hiding it from his business partners, too. By the time I crept back into our darkened penthouse, hours later, Ben's words echoed in my head. If Julian was capable of defrauding his own partners, what chance did I have? I had come back for one thing, the original prenuptial agreement locked in Julian's safe. In the nursery, the moonlight streamed in, illuminating the empty crib, a silent testament to a future that had been stolen. I didn't want to be here when he returned, but Ben insisted the document was my only leverage. I found the safe behind a painting, and my fingers trembled as I entered the code. Our anniversary. The heavy door swung open. The apartment was still, holding its breath. I grabbed the papers and was turning to leave when the sound of a key in the lock froze me in place. My handbag, filled with the printed emails and the damning financial proposal, felt like a block of ice against my side. At 12:47 a.m., Julian walked in. He smelled of scotch and something else. Victory. His tie was loosened, his expression smug. He stopped dead when he saw me standing in the hall, holding the file. "You're home," he said, his voice flat. My own voice was surprisingly steady. "You weren't at a client dinner." He didn't even blink. "What are you talking about?" I didn't have to answer. I walked to the marble island in the kitchen and slid the asset realignment proposal across its surface. For the first time in our marriage, I saw true, unfiltered panic in his eyes. Fear. "Where did you find this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It was accidentally forwarded to me," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Along with the Aspen reservations, the Shell Company documents, and the plan to make sure your pregnant wife was left with absolutely nothing." His jaw clenched. The mask of the charming, successful architect finally shattered. "Clara, you don't understand what you're doing. These are for the company. A trip to Chicago with Sienna." "For business?" I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. His lack of a response was all the answer I needed. The air in our penthouse grew heavy and tight. He moved toward me, his own voice dropping to a low growl. "You have no idea what's going on, Clara, and it will be so much simpler for you if you just drop it." The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. There was no apology in his tone. He wasn't afraid of me leaving him. He was terrified of losing his grip on the situation. I took a slow step back, my heart hammering against my ribs. And that's when he made his critical error, a quiet slip of the tongue he never thought I'd hear. "If she found out about the journalist," he breathed, "she would actually burn it all down." The words hit me like a physical blow. A journalist, not just Sienna, but someone else entirely. For a second, the polished marble floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet, as if the revelation had unsettled the very foundations of my world. I took a deep, steadying breath and met Arthur's gaze directly. "What journalist?" I asked, my voice calm and even. Arthur went completely still. His eyes flickered toward the half-finished nursery, then snapped back to me. "You heard wrong," he said, the words coming out too quickly, far too fast, far too defensive. "No," I whispered, the sound fragile in the tense silence. I heard every single word. He let out a harsh breath, dragging a hand across his forehead. "Clara, things are complicated right now. The pressure with the new tower has been immense. I made a few poor choices." His voice turned syrupy sweet, the fake warmth he always used when he wanted me to stop asking questions. "You know how you get when you're pregnant. You blow things out of proportion. That was why I kept this from you." I just stared at him, feeling years of his subtle manipulations finally hardening into a single, sharp point of clarity. "So, how many poor choices are we talking about?" I asked. 2? 3? Was any part of this life you built for us actually real? Arthur's expression became a mask of stone. "I have given you everything. You would do well to remember that." A familiar tide of guilt tried to pull me under, but this time, it failed to find purchase. In its place, something else began to rise. Fury, certainly, but also a sliver of self-worth I hadn't felt in years. "Giving me things isn't the same as being honest with me," I stated. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "You don't know what you're talking about." He took another step forward. I took one back. My hand grazed the side of my purse, where my phone with the damning screenshots was safely tucked away. He saw the motion. "What's in the purse, Clara?" "Evidence," I replied plainly. His face went dark, and for the very first time, I saw genuine panic in his eyes. It wasn't the fear of losing his wife. It was the fear of losing his empire, his reputation. His money. "Give it to me," he commanded. "No." He lunged for the purse, but I was quicker than I knew I could be. I snatched it and darted behind the kitchen island, creating a barrier between us. My heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs, but my voice came out unshaken. "You are not touching this. Not ever again." His breathing grew ragged. "You are not walking out of this apartment with that phone." A cold dread washed over me. "Watch me." At that exact moment, the baby monitor on the counter crackled to life with a soft, static hiss. Arthur flinched, surprised. I took my chance, hurrying toward the front door. Just then, my phone vibrated loudly against the countertop, where I'd left it. A new message from an encrypted number. Clara. "The other woman isn't the socialite. She's the story." The words on the screen seemed to steal the oxygen from the room. The story. My thoughts swirled, trying to connect the dots, trying to make sense of a puzzle I never even knew existed. The silent nursery felt like a ticking clock, a reminder that my life was no longer just my own. "We are leaving," I told Arthur, my voice ringing with finality. "You're not going anywhere." His tone was low and menacing. He moved to block my path, but the thought of the baby seemed to hold him back. For a man who cared so little for our family, it was amazing how quickly he'd use it as a shield. I grabbed my purse with one hand and my pre-packed overnight bag with the other. "Move," I ordered. Arthur didn't budge. Instead, a cruel smirk spread across his face. "Clara, do you honestly believe you can build a new life for you and a baby? Without my resources? Without my name?" The condescension in his voice was thick enough to choke on, but it no longer had power over me. Not after what I was starting to understand. I maneuvered around him and pulled the heavy door open. The hallway of our penthouse felt strangely cold. I placed a protective hand on my stomach, my baby's safety the only thing that mattered. The stress was a real and present danger, and I felt fear start to creep in. Downstairs, the city lights of Chicago spread out like a sea of distant stars. I rushed to the elevator, my heart pounding with each hurried step. As I reached the grand lobby, my phone buzzed one more time. "A car is waiting for you at the east entrance. Get inside." J.C. Julian Croft. I didn't know the name. I couldn't trust him. But he was the only person offering a lifeline. A dark sedan was idling by the curb, just as the message promised. The driver got out and opened the rear door for me. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Croft sent me. He said to expect you," the driver added gently. A wave of doubt washed over me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but staying meant facing Arthur again, and I knew he was more desperate now than he had ever been. I slid into the back seat. The door closed with a soft thud, and the locks engaged automatically, a sound that felt both terrifying and final. As the sedan smoothly pulled into traffic, I glanced up at our penthouse. Arthur's silhouette was framed in the floor-to-ceiling window, watching me disappear into the night. The driver spoke, his voice quiet. "Mr. Croft is waiting to meet you." "For what?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He met my eyes in the rear-view mirror. "To tell you who the journalist is, and what she discovered that made Arthur want to erase her completely." The sedan cut through the heart of downtown Chicago, the brilliant lights of the skyscrapers reflecting on the windows like shattered fragments of the life I was running from. I rested a hand on my stomach, the small life inside me a constant grounding presence amid the swirling chaos. The driver finally pulled up to a discreet, modern building in the loop. The place wasn't flashy. It was private and serious, the kind of building where powerful secrets were kept, not exposed. He led me through a quiet side entrance, down a sterile corridor, and into a stark conference room where Julian Croft stood waiting. He didn't look like a corporate titan. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, his eyes filled with a weary determination. "Clara?" he said, his voice raspy. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. I remained standing, clutching my purse. Just tell me who she is. Julian gave a solemn nod, bracing himself. Before I do that, you need to understand my role in all of this. I crossed my arms over my chest, a shield against the world. Then you'd better start talking. He took a deep breath. Arthur didn't just have an affair with you. He cultivated a type. Ambitious women, women with access. He thought he was untouchable. He began to pace, his hands clenched into fists. But one of those women was smarter than he was. My heart gave a painful throb. Who? Julian stopped pacing. My best investigative reporter. Her name was Isabel. The name hit me, but it was the next words that knocked the wind out of me. Was? She met Arthur while working a story on his new skyscraper. He thought he could charm her, control the narrative. She let him believe it. A bitter, sick feeling churned in my stomach. What did he do to her? He tried to buy her silence, Julian said, his voice cracking slightly. When that didn't work, he threatened her. Threatened to ruin her reputation, leak doctored photos, go after her family. She came to me a few weeks ago, deeply afraid, and then, a week later, she was gone. Chills prickled my skin. Gone? The police said she took a personal leave, that she just needed to get away. But Isabel would never just disappear. He looked me straight in the eye. The last encrypted file she sent me was a series of engineering reports from Arthur's company, heavily redacted. My own breath hitched in my throat. So you're saying, Julian nodded, his expression grim and absolute. Yes, Arthur knows exactly where my reporter is. The room felt like it was closing in. Then, Julian delivered the final, devastating blow. Sienna was never the secret. She was the smokescreen. By the next morning, the entire world seemed to have shifted on its axis. I sat in Julian's quiet, sterile office, cradling a mug of tea I had no intention of drinking. I hadn't slept, my mind replaying every lie Arthur had ever told me. Julian stood by the large window overlooking the city, his phone buzzing nonstop. Arthur's company is imploding, he said, reading a new alert. The board is in an emergency session. An anonymous source tipped off the city inspectors about potential structural fraud in the new tower. My heart leaped into my throat. You think Arthur, he was breaking the law? Julian turned to face me, his eyes dark. I think Arthur was cutting corners with human lives, and his board is just now realizing the extent of their liability. I should have felt horrified, but all I felt was a cold, sharp sense of validation. After years of being made to feel small and crazy, watching his kingdom of lies begin to crumble was a strange and bitter form of justice. But Julian wasn't done. Sienna released a statement through her publicist an hour ago, he added. She's claiming she was a victim of Arthur's manipulations and is cooperating with all official inquiries. The trips, the jewelry. I trailed off. All billed to the project, Julian confirmed. Filed under consultant fees. It was part of what Isabel uncovered. Hearing her name again sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. So Sienna knew about Isabel? Not directly, Julian said. But Isabel found out that Arthur was using Sienna as a public distraction. It was a classic misdirection. Keep the press focused on the affair, not the fraud. A cold shiver traced its way down my spine. What do you believe really happened to Isabel? I whispered. Julian's jaw tightened into a hard line. I think Isabel found the one piece of evidence that could send him to prison for the rest of his life, and he buried it with her. Before I could even process that, Julian's phone buzzed again. This time, he went rigid, his face paling. What is it? I asked, rising to my feet. He turned the screen to me. It was a breaking news alert. Arthur Vance taken into custody for questioning regarding corporate fraud. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. So it's over. Julian didn't look relieved. Clara, a man like Arthur doesn't just surrender. When a predator is cornered, they become infinitely more dangerous. As if on cue, my own phone vibrated on the conference table. A voicemail notification from a blocked number. Julian's eyes met mine, hard and serious. Don't listen to that. But my finger was already hovering over the screen, drawn to the transcript preview. A single sentence was displayed, and it made my blood turn to ice. Clara, you need to call me back. We have to talk about what's hidden in the nursery. Julian's voice, normally so smooth and commanding, was clipped, dangerously low. Zoe stared at me as I hit play on the corrupted audio file. Sienna, Julian's voice hissed from the tablet speaker, you have no idea what you're messing with. This isn't a game. There was a second voice, muffled. The waterfront data, it has to be contained. The recording dissolved into a screech of digital static. Zoe leaned closer, her expression grim. He's terrified, she said. That means Sienna had him cornered. She found something real. My throat felt dry. What could be so important that he'd risk his entire empire? Zoe answered for me. Try selling out an entire city for profit. The penthouse suddenly felt cold. You think he did something to her? Zoe didn't reply directly. She walked over to her briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and laid it on the marble countertop. These are encrypted emails Sienna sent to a dead drop account. I didn't want to show you until I was certain Julian was the target. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. Inside were printouts of messages from Sienna. I'm in. The waterfront project servers. The data streams aren't just for traffic flow. He's selling it all. The intel is going to private contractors. If I go dark, check the lighthouse drive. He'll know what that means. Another message, sent hours later. He knows I have a copy. And the last one, sent at 2:15 in the morning. He's coming over. I shouldn't have confronted him. My eyes blurred with tears. Why didn't the police look into this? Oh, they did, Zoe said, her voice laced with acid. They talked to Julian. He told them she was an unstable activist, obsessed with him. He showed them her blog posts, criticizing his work. They bought it. His charm and his donations to the police foundation worked wonders. A cold fury began to burn through my shock. Julian hadn't just had an affair. He hadn't just lied. He had orchestrated a smear campaign to erase a woman who threatened him. Then, another thought hit me, like a physical blow. The anonymous tips Zoe had been getting. It wasn't Sienna, Zoe said quietly. The messages came from someone else. Who? She shook her head. Someone inside his development firm. Someone who saw what Sienna found and tried to warn us. Before I could process that, Zoe's phone lit up with a news alert. She glanced at the screen, and all the color drained from her face. What is it? I whispered. She turned the phone toward me. A breaking news headline glowed in the dim light. Real estate magnate Julian Croft vanishes ahead of SEC hearing. My breath hitched. Then came the final sentence. Sources suggest he may be seeking refuge at a private family property. The words echoed in the silent room, a death knell for the life I thought I had. Julian Croft vanishes. Seeking refuge at a private family property. My first reaction was sheer disbelief. Julian didn't run from problems. He crushed them. He was a predator, a titan of industry. But as I pieced it all together, the investigation, Sienna's disappearance, the data harvesting, I realized that running was the only move a guilty man had left. I felt a kick from inside me, a tiny flutter that grounded me in a terrifying new reality. Clara, we have to go, Zoe said, her voice firm, pulling me from my trance. I placed a hand on my swollen belly. We're going somewhere safe, I said, more to myself than to her. Somewhere he can never find us. Zoe watched me with a fierce, protective loyalty I was deeply grateful for. Clara, we move now. If Julian is this desperate, he's unpredictable. I took a deep, shaky breath. Where can we possibly go? A safe house my publication keeps for sources in Queen Anne, she said, completely off book. Not even Julian's security people could find it. Within minutes, Zoe had us moving. As we rode the private elevator down from the penthouse, I held my stomach, my racing heart calming only with the thought of the life I had to protect. I wasn't just running from Julian anymore. I was running to save my child. The elevator opened into a modest apartment that looked out over the city. Its simplicity was a stark contrast to the opulent prison I had just left. The Space Needle glowed in the distance. It felt like a different world, a quiet harbor in the middle of a raging storm. I walked to the window, placing my palm against the cool glass. The city lights looked like a scattered handful of diamonds. I had lived in a gilded cage for so long, terrified of losing my security, my status, my husband's affection, that I never saw the bars. The most dangerous thing I had ever done was stay with him. Zoe came to stand beside me. Clara, there's more. Julian left a voicemail for my editor right before he disappeared. My stomach nodded. What did it say? He claimed you were in danger, but not from him. A chill traced its way down my spine. Not from him? That doesn't make sense. Zoe hesitated. He said the people he was in business with were cleaning house, that they wouldn't stop at him. Just then, the apartment's intercom let out a sharp, jarring buzz. Zoe and I both froze. Nobody should know we're here. The intercom buzzed a second time, followed by a man's calm, unfamiliar voice. Clara, open the door. I'm the one who's been sending your sister the information. That voice, so steady and composed, was more frightening than a threat. Clara, open the door. I'm the one who's been sending the information. My blood ran cold. I instinctively took a step back, one hand on my stomach. Zoe moved to stand in front of me, her body language shifting from journalist to protector, the kind of stance you take when you know the wolf is at the door. Don't you dare open it, Zoe hissed. The intercom buzzed again. You're not safe with her, Clara. Not with Julian gone, and not with them closing in. Zoe's jaw was set. He knows your name. He knows Julian disappeared. He knows we're here. This isn't a coincidence. I swallowed against the fear in my throat. Then who is he? Zoe walked to the security monitor and pressed a button. The screen showed a man in a gray hoodie standing in the hallway. He looked to be in his late 30s, unassuming, but with an intensity in his eyes that was unmistakable. That's Ben Carter, Zoe whispered, shocked. He's the head of IT security at Julian's company. My heart rate spiked. IT security? He's the one who investigates data breaches, Zoe finished. If he's here, this is about more than just an affair. The intercom buzzed once more, his voice more urgent now. Clara, please. I'm trying to keep you and your baby alive. The word baby struck me like a physical blow. My voice was a choked whisper. Zoe, what is he talking about? Zoe didn't take her eyes off the screen. She pressed the talk button. Carter, state your purpose. Why are you here? There was a brief silence, then, because Julian didn't just sell data. Sienna found out who he was selling it to, and now those people think Clara has Sienna's backup files. My heart hammered against my ribs. What files? Ben leaned toward the camera. The lighthouse drive, the one Sienna mentioned before she vanished. Julian couldn't find it. His partners believe you know where it is. My breath caught. But I don't. I don't know anything. That doesn't matter, Ben replied. They think you do. Zoe's voice was sharp steel. Who, Carter? Who is they? Ben hesitated, and that single moment of silence was more terrifying than anything he had said. "This goes way beyond Julian Croft," he said softly. "He was just the middleman." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The intercom buzzed one final time as his voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "Clara, they're coming for you tonight." For a long moment, nobody in the apartment moved or even breathed. The Seattle city lights outside seemed to dim as Ben's warning hung in the air. "They're coming tonight." My mind reeled. Who were they? What had Sienna stumbled upon that was so massive they would hunt Julian down and now come for me? Zoe snapped into action, her demeanor shifting to someone calm, focused, and in control. "Clara, go to the bedroom. Lock the door and stay away from the window. Now." I hurried down the hall, my arms wrapped around my belly. "It's going to be okay, little one," I whispered, trying to convince myself as much as the baby. "Mommy's got you." I locked myself in, my ear pressed against the door. When I finally crept back into the living room, Zoe was on her laptop, monitoring the building's external camera feeds. "One black SUV just parked at the end of the block," she said, her voice low. "No license plates." A wave of nausea washed over me. "Do you think they followed us?" "I think they were always right behind us," Zoe replied grimly. Julian wasn't running from the feds. He was running from them. A heavy, forceful pounding began at the apartment door. It wasn't a knock. It was an assault. "Ms. Ross," a muffled but authoritative voice called out, "we need to have a word with you." The blood drained from my face. They knew my maiden name. They knew exactly who I was and where to find me. This was calculated. Ben's voice crackled through the intercom again, this time filled with panic. "Don't open that door. They aren't police. They're retrievers," he said, his voice strained. "Hired by one of the data buyers. Sienna discovered they were selling surveillance data to foreign intelligence. Julian tried to back out. When Sienna threatened to expose everyone, they made her disappear. Now they want her evidence." Zoe's face was pale. "We're out of time." She grabbed a heavy-duty key card and slid open a small, unmarked panel next to the bookshelf. She pressed the card against a sensor, and a section of the wall clicked open, revealing a dark, narrow fire escape corridor. "Clara," she ordered, turning to me, "you take this. It goes down to the alley. I have a car parked 2 streets over. The keys are in the glove box." "What about you?" I cried. She pushed me gently toward the opening. "I'll wipe the drives and buy you time. They want the lighthouse drive, not a journalist." A deafening crash echoed from the front door as the wood began to splinter. I turned to flee, and in that exact instant, the lights in the entire apartment went out. The darkness was absolute, a sudden, suffocating blanket that felt deliberate, as if a switch had been flipped somewhere. I froze, my hand on the cold metal of the hidden doorway. Behind me, I heard the main door of the apartment splinter and burst open. My survival instinct screamed. I stumbled back from the tablet's glow, a wave of nausea turning in my stomach. "Clara," his voice was a placid lake, dangerously calm. "I'm pregnant, Arthur," I whispered, clutching my belly. His hand, heavy with the weight of our wedding ring, rested on my arm. From the doorway of our sterile, white bedroom, he spoke with chilling control. "You're overreacting. Put the tablet down before you see something you'll regret." His words were a threat, cold and sharp. "Forget what you saw, Clara. This is between us." I felt a kick, a tiny flutter against my palm. He wasn't just hiding an affair. They were moving millions, and I had just stumbled into their digital paper trail. Arthur stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "Clara, don't leave this room." I fumbled along the bookshelf until my fingers found the emergency key card. The door to the private elevator hissed open. Using my phone's screen for light, I stepped into the mirrored box, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the marble floor behind me. The elevator was a cage of our own reflection. Gold fixtures gleamed. The air smelled of expensive cologne and lies. My unborn baby was my only anchor in the dizzying descent. Oh God, I'm so sorry, little one. I know, but we have to go. I promise I'll keep you safe. A thud rattled the elevator, the sound of a fist hitting the call button panel outside. He was in the stairwell. I moved faster. Once the doors opened in the garage, my breath catching in my throat. Every step felt like wading through cement. I could hear him taking the stairs 2 at a time, his polished shoes clacking with menace. "Don't be a fool, Clara," one of them shouted. I whispered to my belly, "Not a sound. We're almost there." We reached the car just as his figure appeared at the end of the parking level, tall and imposing, blocking the exit sign's green glow. His shadow stretched towards me, a predator cornering its prey. My heart hammered against my ribs. The car door required the key fob he'd given me for my birthday. My hands trembled as I pressed the button. The car lights stayed dark. Again, dark. His footsteps slowed, confident. "It's over, Clara," he called out. "Come back upstairs." I pressed the unlock button one last time. Green. The locks clicked. I yanked the door open, sliding inside. The garage was silent except for my own ragged breathing. A silver sedan waited. The passenger door opened, and a frantic voice whispered, "Clara, thank God. Get in." The voice belonged to my sister. Steady, familiar, terrified. Chloe. Before I could object, she leaned over and buckled my seatbelt, then helped me shut the heavy door. I slammed it locked just as Arthur reached the car, his face contorted with rage. One of the men yelled, "Open this door!" Chloe hit the accelerator. Tires screamed across the polished concrete, the sound ricocheting off the walls. The sedan shot forward, navigating around luxury cars until we burst up the ramp and into the rainy Seattle night. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would crack my sternum. My baby kicked again, a sharp, sudden jab. "It's okay, we're okay." Chloe glanced at me from the driver's seat. "They won't get us. I know who she is now." She turned to me, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Arthur isn't just cheating. He's being played. But you're the one in danger now." "What are you talking about?" I pleaded. "They needed to shut you up tonight." "They wanted to scare you into silence," Chloe corrected. "But the second you found those offshore accounts, everything changed. The city lights streaked past us. Rain slicked the windows. Chloe took a sharp right, merging with the flow of traffic on the viaduct, just as Arthur's black Tesla appeared in the rearview mirror. "He's still following us," Chloe muttered. Her jaw was set. "Then let's end this." She navigated her phone with one hand. "I'm sending everything you found to Marcus and your prenup lawyer." I went rigid, but Arthur gave me access to that cloud drive. Chloe's eyes met mine in the mirror. "Arthur trusted you to never look. He knew I would help you burn it all down if he ever hurt you. I didn't send them sooner because I needed you to see for yourself." Her voice softened. "Now you have." "The Tesla gained on us," Chloe whispered. "Hang on." We swerved abruptly, taking an exit toward the waterfront, horns blaring around us. The Tesla got caught behind a city bus, its headlights shrinking in the distance. The other car was gone. Chloe turned to me. "Clara, listen. Once Marcus sees these files, Arthur won't be chasing you. He'll be running from the SEC." My breathing began to even out for the first time all night. Then Chloe's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale. "It's from Marcus," she whispered. "He says Arthur is at his penthouse." I swallowed. "Alone?" Chloe slowly shook her head. "No, and he says Arthur left something for you." Marcus met us at the lobby of his Belltown tower just before dawn. The sky was turning a soft gray over the Sound, as if the city were holding its breath. I held my belly as Marcus led us into the elevator, with a grim silence that made my insides clench. Chloe stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows while Marcus held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a single diamond earring, the one Simone wore in every company photo, every interview, every time she wanted to look untouchable. Now, it looked cheap. Tawdry. "I found it on the balcony," Marcus said quietly. "After Arthur's car left." My voice was a ghost. "So he's with her?" Marcus nodded. "He recorded a confession for you." My fingers felt numb as I took the tablet he offered me. Arthur's face filled the screen. Haggard, defeated, the mask of control shattered. "Clara," he began, "I never wanted you to find out like this. I didn't know she would go after our money. Your money." He tried to stop her. "When I realized she was setting me up too, I thought I could fix it. But the truth is, there's no fixing what we did." "What I did," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for all of it. The lies, the betrayal, your peace of mind. You and our baby didn't deserve any of this." The screen faded to black. I thought I would collapse. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, like a fever breaking. Marcus stepped forward. "The files you sent went to the entire board an hour ago. Federal investigators are on their way to your penthouse. Simone Dubois has already been detained at the airport." Justice. A quiet, final justice. Marcus let out a long breath. "You and your baby are safe now." Safe? The word felt foreign on my tongue. The baby kicked gently. "Mom, can we live somewhere with a view of the water forever?" I imagined saying one day. I smiled, a real smile. "Maybe we can." Marcus hesitated, then approached with a kindness that felt solid and real. "Clara, I don't want to presume, but if you decide to start over, not because you're running, but because you're ready to build something new, I hope you'll let me help. As your friend. Yours and the baby's." His decency was a quiet dawn after a long, dark night. For the first time in forever, I let myself picture a life built on truth, security, and love, not just survival. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "Maybe we start now." And for the first time, the future felt like it truly belonged to me. So that is how our story concludes, my dear friends. And if you've stayed with me until this moment, it suggests that some part of this journey resonated deep within your own heart. Perhaps it brought to mind a battle you survived. Perhaps it echoed a piece of wisdom you needed to hear. Or perhaps it was a simple reminder that even after the most devastating storms, there is always a path forward. You see, the Stoics had a saying, "The obstacle is the way." And Clara's story is a testament to that. Every act of betrayal forced a lesson in self-worth. Every loss cleared the way for a new beginning. Every moment that she believed would shatter her only forged her into someone stronger, more resolute, and more deeply alive. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that is the very soul of this story. We can rarely control what is done to us, but we can always choose what we become in response. If Clara can find her footing and rise again, so can you. So before you leave, I want to ask, did this story stir something in you? Did it help you to breathe a little more freely, or see your own path with new eyes? If so, I invite you to like this video. Share it with someone who might need a little extra strength tonight, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows these stories to continue finding the people they are meant to heal. Before we conclude today's tale, I need to make something perfectly clear for the YouTube platform and for all of you listening. This entire account is a work of fiction, crafted purely for emotional exploration and for entertainment. Any similarity to actual people, events, or circumstances is entirely coincidental. The characters, their challenges, and the dramatic turns were all written to inspire, to offer comfort, and to provide our viewers with a safe space to explore powerful themes of resilience, healing, and personal empowerment. Nothing presented in this video should ever be taken as a factual report or a real-life testimony. Our one and only goal is to share meaningful narratives that can touch the human heart and help all of us reflect on our own lives with greater clarity and self-compassion. Thank you so much for joining us with an open mind and a kind spirit.